Good evening and salutations, my soap opera fans and just my subscribers in general. You've seen the title, you know what I'm talking about. And this is particularly today's episode with Chelsea, right? Because Chelsea has this, well, Allison has this thing with Chelsea that's taken to the extremes of what you would call a parasocial relationship. See, she's been having this with Chelsea before she met her. And that pretty much basically snipped there saying that you have this relationship with somebody that you never met, right? A celebrity or whatever, somebody that you're super obsessing with, that's exactly what that is. And when she confronts her today, and Allison sits there and says, it's your content that drew me to you. You know, this is the end result of you being an influencer. And then she goes back home and she pretty much kind of has a meltdown. And she's talking to her mom and she's blaming herself for essentially inviting this person that she's never met into her life and obsessing over her. And the reason why I'm sitting there bringing this up today is because, one, the people that watch these shows, like, especially this one, some of them are older generation, older crowd. And I feel like there's a huge disconnect. Like, I feel like an older person, some older people will sit there and watch this and be like, see, this is why it was just more simpler back in my day. We didn't have to sit there and worry about the internet or whatever. Or they would sit there and say something along the lines of, oh, just get off the internet. That'll sit there and solve all your problems. But, like, that's not how that works, right? Like, okay, it might have been easier on some level to not have to deal with that. But we don't live in a time, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't live in those times. You have to sit there and deal with the situation at hand. And, I sit there and I look at it and I think to myself, this is what every YouTuber, content creator, podcaster, anyone that talks to an audience has to sit there and be conscious of. How much stuff do we sit there and share with our audience? I remember somebody DM me. They asked me straight up. They was like, "Oh, where you live, where you from, or whatever." And I'm like, "I'm not telling you that." And then they said to me like, "Oh, well, I don't sit there and see the big deal." Now in my head, I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" But it's the truth of the matter. You have to sit there and be conscious of that. You may sit there and think that most people be smart enough to just not tell somebody where you live or anything like that, but you'd be surprised how many people don't sit there and think about that. They don't sit there and think. And, this is something that Madison has sat there and said. This is for any person that does social media. It doesn't matter if you have 1,000 subscribers, 1,000 views, or if you have 10 views. It just takes one person, one unhinged person, to latch onto you or to latch onto a creator, and you're dealing with that situation. And I think it's important for people, for older people who, okay, cool, the internet's not really your thing, but your daughters, your granddaughters, your grandsons are on the internet. And so I think it's a very, what I'm saying, I think that this story is very important. And it's not something to sit there and scoff off and be like, oh, I'm just gonna tell my daughter to not be on the internet, because that's unrealistic. Instead of doing that, just tell them, just make them understand that if you're going to sit there and do this, if you're going to be posting stuff, even if you're just posting stuff on social media like pictures and stuff, it's just to be conscious of that. Don't freak them the hell out, but make sure that they're conscious and understand that to have some sort of boundaries, to have some sort of limits of what to share and what not to share. It doesn't happen too often, but I sit there and I think about a um, content creator named Sweet Anita, who had to sit there and deal with a stalker who encountered her a bunch of times, and it got so bad to the point. I remember there was one point when she talked to the cops, and the cops just told her, "Oh, just get off the internet." Are you fucking serious? No, that like I mean that's not a realistic thing to sit there and tell somebody to get off the internet. Even myself, like I said, that person was sitting there asking me, "Where do I live?" Now, if I was just la di da da, I would sit there and just tell them. But and that's before I really started doing this for a long time, and I started hearing all these horror stories. Yes, there's a certain level of common sense, but I mean, clearly things aren't always common. So I don't. Part of me, I did this video like a couple of times, and just like, where am I going with this? Where am I going with this video? I, I said this a couple of times. So I don't know. I don't know if I said it in this video or not. Um, it is a very interesting storyline. I wish it was portrayed by a better actress, but it's a great storyline nonetheless. And for older people that are sitting there watching it, don't just dismiss it. Don't just sit there and say, "Well, back in my day," or "Oh, this is why I don't like the internet. This is why I don't like social media," because it's unrealistic. You know, it may not be your thing, but it's your grandson's thing. It's your daughter's names and stuff like that. So I don't know. You can sit there and call this a PSA or whatever the hell you want to sit there and call it, but I don't know. That's just my take. Anyway, um, I'm still probably not gonna be doing any reviews on Beyond the Gates because I already did a video talking about how I'm not a fan of the show. But with that being said, I do watch it, and there are certain parts of this show that I do find interesting. Anyway, let me know what your takes are on this story and this episode and just, you know, internet in general.